So do you have training for your volunteers?
Yes, we do. We have about a 16-hour course we put our volunteers through. It goes about some of those behaviors we talk about here. We have our recovery staff come in and do some training and talk about some of those addictive behaviors, some of those manipulative behaviors. We go over all our policy and procedures for the mission so that they're aware of all those things as well. So yes, it's very extensive. We have them go down and eat with our clientele down in our kitchen, help serve as part of that training, so they understand, who they are and who is it that they are serving and helping. So they get a better idea about that. Did that answer your question? Let me go here and I'll come back.
You talked about the homeless manipulating the process.
Mm-hmm.
It's been suggested to us that rather than we set this all up, that we get some homeless people to come in and help us do that. Is that a good idea?
It's not a bad idea. We utilize our homeless as volunteers in our shelter. Those that we've developed a rapport with, those that are are in a good place in their life, that don't have addiction issues. One of the things we find is that the homeless folks don't have a real high sense of self-worth, And so when you just give them things without asking for anything in return, you're not helping them in that self-worth. But if they're able to participate in some way, because we have the folks cleaning, cooking, just participate in different aspects of the mission, in addition to helping us keep the peace amongst themselves, quite frankly, because they know those guys and they know how to, they know who the troublemakers are, they know who the folks are that are, that are peaceful, and you utilize them in that process, and it builds their self-esteem and builds their self-worth. So yes, I think that is a very good idea.
Thank you.
Matt?
Could you quickly run through the qualifications of your staff that are working?
Sure.
Nurses, social workers, that kind of thing, just kind of quickly. So
Sure. The first and foremost thing I look for in a person before they come on staff is, do they have a heart for what we're doing? Okay. Do they have that propensity? Because they can't be there for the money, because for that number of staff and for that budget, I don't pay my folks very well. So that's the first thing. Do they have a real heart for the ministry, for wanting to help people? And then we look at each different, it depends on the position. Like for my case managers for our drug and alcohol recovery program, right now we're doing a certification program for those folks. They're doing the CAR certification, which is C-A-A-R-R, and don't ask me what that means, because I can't hardly remember my name sometimes. So that's just a state certified process for them to go through to get a certain baseline training for drug and alcohol recovery program. So that's my case managers. My director of the women's program right now, she has her master's in social work, so she has her MSW, and so she heads up my women's recovery program. And my men's director for the men's program is actually a trained engineer. He actually was a 30-year alcoholic, came into the program, got sober, and decided he needed to stay there. And so he adds a totally different analytical aspect to my program, and it's a really good thing. So that's his process. So most of the training and most of the qualifications we look for are really specific to the position, and then we train them up on that position. So if you think that I have a staff full of MSWs, I don't.
No, that's what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah.
What are already the professionals that are working for you, and then the others are the ones that you obviously are bringing along and training?
Correct. Like for case management, a lot of times it's just folks that have had prior work in like social services or something like that have any kind of case management. They make good case managers for folks, especially for guest services, doing all the intake and things for them. So the qualifications, ideally, if you can pay for it, somebody who has maybe a bachelor's in psychology. I do have some staff that have their bachelor's and are going for their master's in organizational leadership, obviously in theology. My pastor of guest services there, Pastor Dave Honey, he has his master's in theology, going for his PhD. But most of the ground level people, there's a lot of on-the-job training. I would say over half my staff either have been homeless or have had an addiction issue before getting their lives straightened out and coming to work for me, because they have a real good understanding of where these folks are coming from, and probably have a little bit more sympathy, but also can say no when they need to say no, because they've been there and done that, and they could call the folks out on that.
How much does faith involved in your situation? In other words, do you require them to take a Bible course? I mean, it's an important issue, faith-based.
Sure. A couple different models for us. We are the Good News Rescue Mission, so it's about the good news of the gospel, right? So that's our faith-based program. So for the folks, men and women coming through our recovery program, the faith portion of it is very, very strong. We take a three-prong approach to the recovery program. One prong is, sobriety. Make sure that they get their sobriety through AA or Celebrate Recovery, some of those other programs out there. There is the sober living. How do they do living after they've gotten their sobriety? How do they go back into the community? So we train them up on that. We have a full academic center to help them re-educate. And then there's the discipleship. How do they have a relationship with the Lord that helps them maintain their sobriety?
It's Bible-based.
Yes. So the guest services or shelter guests, there is no requirement to attend any Bible studies, but we do have a requirement to attend chapel every night. So we do have a chapel service every night as part of our program. There are lots of missions out there that are not faith-based. They're more of a social model, and so it just depends on what this community decides that it wants to do.
How do you coordinate with other resources in the community so that you're not spreading your resources too thin?
Right.
And getting the people so those services are sort of centralized?
One of the things we have there that is available in every county is called a continuum of care. It's actually kind of a requirement for HUD. If you're going to get any HUD finance, that you have to have this continuum of care. And what that is basically a consortium of all the providers in the community, whether you're faith-based or not, or government-supported or not, or donations. So it's a continuum of care that we meet once a month. The main focus is that we're sharing information, sharing about what we're doing as far as available resources, and also making sure that we're not duplicating services. The last thing I want to do is do something that somebody else is already doing. And so for us, we have what's called a resource center, kind of what you have here, which is where all our people that come into our shelter go through the resource center, where the case manager is able to do all the kind of the data entry, if you will, do all the intake information, enter into our database. And that's where they do the interviewing, the one-on-one, to find out what their needs are. And then hook them up with resources in the community. Because we know we can't do it all as a mission, so we're just kind of a central clearinghouse, if you will. We come here, we gather them, and then we can source them out to the different, resources within the community, agencies or ministries in the community that can help them achieve what they're trying to achieve. Did that answer your question?
When you have someone come in off the street that says they're homeless, what type of paperwork do they need to have? with
Not
them?
really any paperwork. They come in, they can usually they can come in, they don't have to go into intake right away. So they can come in, get shelter, and then within the next 3 or 4 days, we ask them to go talk to the intake worker, which then that's the interview process. And it's just a matter of finding out some of the demographics from them, some of the critical information, name, contact numbers, emergency contact numbers, any medical conditions that you may have. So it's just a whole gamut of information.
How do you treat sex offenders? Or do you even delve into that?
Okay, sex offenders, good question. The board, because I'm governed by a board of directors that oversee me, and then I oversee the rest of the mission. The board of directors came to a policy that we don't allow sex offenders to spend the night there at the mission. Mainly because we have, of course, it's a men's and women's shelter, and there's small children
So how
around.
do you know if they are? You just-
Well, we run a background check
You
on
do?
everybody comes into
Okay,
the mission.
okay,
Yeah,
so
when
you-
they check in,
Okay,
even when they're coming in overnight,
so
we always
it's
do a
like on
quick,
Bacon's Law.
exactly, we just do a quick check on them,
Okay.
just to make sure that they're not,
Okay,
as best we can anyways, on the
Yeah.
initial check to
Okay.
see if they, once they do their intake, we do a little bit deeper
sure.
check on that. Yes, sir.
How do you deal with, sometimes people get real rowdy and obnoxious or whatever?
Well, we have basically, we try to keep our rules very simple. There's kind of 2 things we learned in kindergarten that we try to enforce there. One is keep your hands to yourself and don't steal anybody else's toys. Right? So kind of our basis for our, what we require of people, are kind of based on those 2 things. Don't mess with other people and you don't steal from other people. If you can do,
soap,
what's that?
soap in the mouth?
Something melt, well, no, again, that's corporal punishment, then the officer will be called over and then we'll be, have another conversation. So what we do is just kind of base our rules on that. So we have a set of rules for behavior. There are infractions that are automatic ejection, if you will. Anything that violates, the safety of others is our first and foremost, then we'll ask people to leave the shelter.
Even health, they're really dirty, they don't want to clean up.
We work with them to try to, because no, usually when somebody's in that state, it's usually because there's a mental health issue connected with that, why they're not keeping up their hygiene. So we try to work with that, so we tread very carefully on that. So as far as the rules, if they can't maintain, if they bring a weapon in, if they are, sexually assault somebody, something, a threat to somebody else or a safety threat, then we ask them to leave. Most of the time they leave, willingly. Sometimes we have to involve the Reading Police Department to come and, remove them from the facility. What happens when somebody is dismissed from shelter for a discipline issue is we get together with our guest service staff every Thursday, and so they may be told to leave premises and you have no services, but come back on Thursday and we can talk this out and see how we can resolve this issue. So there's a way for them to get back in. That's that fine line between, helping and enabling, because we want to help them, right? And we want to help them address why they're behaving that way. So we want them to come back so we can have a chance to talk with them when, now that the situation got diffused, they can sit down and talk about what happened and how can we help you not go there again. So we're always trying to do that. The other thing that's interesting is for us, is that I don't care what you bring in your person, meaning you could be intoxicated or under the influence. I just don't want you bringing anything with you into the shelter. Okay? So for us, it's people are very vulnerable in two stages, to two groups, if you will. When they have mental health issues, they're very, very susceptible to the elements, obviously, so we want them to come in. And folks that are under the influence also are not in the best decision-making process either, so being out in the elements can be fatal for them. So we want them to come in, so long as they can behave themselves, and that's the key critical part. And that's where we utilize our volunteers. Also our volunteers, our shelter guest volunteers at night, will help us do security at night as well. Because I don't have any staff at night there. After 9 o'clock until 6 o'clock in the morning, I have no staff.
Oh, you don't? Nobody's paid?
Just volunteers?
Just the volunteers.
How many? Okay.
We rotate that, so we probably have one on in the women's shelter. There's a lady over there, and there's usually one or two men on, depending if we have the chapel open and we have folks over there, then we'll have somebody post there, and then we'll have one in our main building, so about 2 to 3 people.
So there is somebody there at night,
Yes, but they're shelter guests, typically, a volunteer.
and they don't know, if something happens, they call the police or whatever.
Correct. We have some protocols set up for them. We have walkie-talkies, they can talk to each other to get help, and then the last course, of course, is you have to call 911 to be able to get help there.
Do you screen your volunteers?
We do the background check. Now, you mean our shelter volunteers
Yeah,
or
your
our general
No, your
community
shelter
volunteers?
volunteers, say.
Yeah, we do a little bit deeper background check on them, and we've already seen them for a while, so it's not somebody who just walks in the street and really give them what we call a red badge and put them, to volunteer. They kind of have to prove themselves a little bit, and want to progress. They're usually involved in one of our programs, so they're staying there a little bit longer, so they kind of know the routine, if you will, and then we'll put them into that process. There's another, yes ma'am.
I was wondering how medical needs are addressed.
Medical needs, that's a very tough one. We have set up a medical dorm, if you will. A lot of times, because the two hospitals, there's homeless folks that will be discharged from the hospital right onto the streets and kind of expected to rehabilitate. So we work very closely with the local hospitals. If there is somebody who's ambulatory, somebody who can move around, but still needs some extended care, they can call us and then we'll see if we have a medical bed available for them. And then we'll take them in there so they can stay on campus. And then we have volunteer nurses that come in throughout the day and be checking up on them and just making sure that they're okay.
Well, the reason that I was asking that is that in my, I think 3.5 years, I've been trying to make get trust with the homeless and trying to give some food and direction to whatever they might need. And the one person that was like what you said, and I'm assuming because he wore a leg thing that he may have had been a
Sexual offender.
sex offender.
That's not entirely true. Sometimes people are on probation or on parole.
At
will
any
also
rate,
have
for
that.
whatever, he had emphysema very badly.
Oh,
And his friends there on the out of doors and the elements would help him as best they could.
yeah.
And then he would go to the hospital. Then he would have 3 or 4 days or 5 days in the hospital with good food and care. And then he was back, but he had no other place to go.
Right.
This winter he died. And it was sad to me because he wanted to get back to Yreka where he had lived in a shelter and had, you know, and, and it just seems like, I mean, when he was needing to go one time, and I asked him if he wanted to go, and he said, that he didn't want to go, but he needed to go, and I said I would drive him. He told me it would have taken him 2 hours to walk, and it wasn't that far,
To Yreka.
because he would have had to stop and get his breath so often,
Oh, goodness.
you see. And so that's, and the other one he had an abscess too, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And when I talked to him the first time, he could hardly talk, he was in such pain.
Yeah.
He had to wait 18 hours, but we got him an extraction, and I just was wondering if you have resources that you could call upon who were willing to include those people in their whatever
We
care.
do. We're very blessed. We have the Shasta Community Health Center. That's a nonprofit medical provider in Reading, right there in Reading. And they have, as part of their medical practice, the Hope Fam, homeless outreach people everywhere. And so they actually have a full clinic on wheels. It's like a big motorhome. And they have 2 of them now. And so they go out to the different camps and provide, you know, medical services to the folks. And they come onto my campus once a week, every Thursday. They're there all day to service the needs of the folks that are there. So as part of the Hope Van, they do have a dental clinic that they have at their permanent, you know, brick and mortar place, and psychiatric services they have available there too. On campus we have a full dental clinic at the Mission there that's staffed by volunteer dentists. So every Wednesday after 5 o'clock, from 5 until all the patients are seen, there's a full-blown medical clinic by volunteer dentists that come in with their hygienists and assistants and to provide medical or dental work for folks for free. So the Hope Van is free, and if they qualify for Medi-Cal and all those things, then they can apply for it through there. And they have social workers and medical workers.
And what about vaccinations like flu shots and that kind of
Yes,
stuff?
in fact, with our volunteer nurses, we have one lead volunteer nurse. She's a real blessing, Elaine, and she does TB testing at the shelter. So everybody who comes in gets TB tested, and then does flu shots for everybody. And those flu shots are provided by the county to us, so that we can administer them to the homeless population.
Wow.
Go ahead.
Well, this is really crazy, but could we be like a second location for your operation?
A sister shelter. I like that.
You know, we're open to anything. You know, we want to just help. You know, so however that looks like, I'd be more than willing to discuss that possibility, what that might look like. You know, provide some organizational, you know, framework for you folks. You know, however that might look, we can certainly help and take a look at that.
I have a dual question. Prioritize, when they come in the door, do you prioritize? And the examples I'm giving is a lady, young mother with 2 little kids, versus the lifestyle choice, the panhandle. How do you screen the panhandle? Because, you know, I've been about a little bit with it, and we had this hot meal, and I have a van, and the guy said, no, I can't come, I'm panhandling. I can't come to the meal. I can't, you know, it's a waste of time to come to a meal. I'm not panhandling. So
I'll make more money panhandling than
yeah, but
Oh, no,
anyway.
no, yeah, let me clarify about that. They've got it organized so that you have your slot.
Oh,
And
your
when your
slot.
slot is over,
Right.
somebody else gets the
Someone comes in.
slot.
But, you know, the prioritize versus the, you know, the lady with the 2 kids, to me it would be a tough, very vulnerable, you know what I mean? So I didn't know how you,
For us, we don't have to prioritize, because it's been, I gotta tell you this, that's part of the faith base that will just blow your mind in that, you know, sometimes we prepare rice for 100, and we have 160 people that show up. You know, and it seems to stretch, you know, the old story in the Bible of the fish and loaves, it just happens to us all the time about that. We always have enough food for everybody who comes to our doors. You know, we have kind of a schedule, we can see the cycle. You know, the cycle comes, you know, the first of the month, our numbers go down because everybody has a paycheck, and they usually go away. Middle of the month, we see the numbers come back up again, and then they dive down again, and then towards the end of the month, they come back up again. So we know the cycle, and so we can prepare to a certain degree for that. But as for us, we haven't had to ever prioritize, nor have we ever had to turn anybody away from the shelter, other than for you know, security issues or a safety issue. So that's.
but the lifestyle choice, I mean, in some way that you,
Well, for us, our viewpoint on that lifestyle choice is, we want them to come to the Mission. Because at some point in their life, just like somebody who has an addiction, they may get sick and tired of being cold and hungry and out there in that lifestyle. And when they do, and when they're ready to make that change, just like somebody who's in their addiction, they have to be ready to make that change. We want them to know that we're there for them, to help them in that next process of their life. So I'm not gonna exclude anybody, because I hope and pray that they will at some point get to that point, just like the prodigal son, who will wanna come back and avail themselves of the services that we have at the mission. Real quick, there's the
Well,
lady in the
I
orange.
thought she was gonna ask
Okay,
the
go ahead,
same
go ahead,
question.
go ahead.
Sorry, guys.
What do you do with the folks that have animals?
That, if they are a bona fide ADA service animal, then that's no question, that's
So
not a
they don't
problem,
come
they can
into
come
the
in,
shelter.
as long as they're an ADA animal. If it's just a comfort animal, I don't have any facilities for that. In the back of my mind, long-range plan, I wanna work with Haven Humane to maybe put up some kennels in a piece of property that we have nearby,
So many of them.
and let them kind of take care of that.
Part of their-
And that is a barrier for some of the folks coming in, because obviously the animal provides, comfort and, companionship and security, for them. So for us, it is an issue, but right now I just don't have the facility to handle the issue. Let me get the guy first, then I'll come back.